come to a meeting. And I said, what kind of meeting is that? And so he said, well, invite your friends, and I invited my friends, but nobody wanted to go to any meeting other than the freshman party. So I went to this meeting, and as we entered into the hostel to attend this meeting, I saw him taking me to different rooms, as a decoy, because there were a lot of security agents underground who eavesdrop on student activities or activists in those days. In those days, I couldn't be brought to a campus in Nigeria as an activist to say things that might be against the government. In fact, it got so bad during the military era when I was in the university that the conspiracy law in Nigeria was changed such that you can conspire against the government with yourself. So the government of Nigeria became psychic. So they could look at you and say, you are conspiring against the government, and they take you to jail for it. So people were very, very careful and cautious. So we got to this meeting. There was an activist who had been invited from town named Femi Falana. And he was sitting in a room, and there were about 10 students. They called themselves the Thomas Sankara movement. Thomas Sankara being another African leader of a military stock, also in Burkina Faso. But he was a good man, and he was killed, and so a lot of student activists fashioned their movements around his name. So as we sat to have this meeting, there was this Christian group across the room singing and clapping, and I said to them, why don't you tell these guys to let us have our meeting peacefully, let us be too. And they said, you are stupid. Those are our people too. That was a distraction against the police, because Nigeria is a heavily religious society. So if you say you are doing Christian stuff, the police doesn't care about that. So the student activists had devised a means of distracting the police. They'll be clapping and singing in Jesus' name, and as soon as they think the police is gone, all of us come together and plan and conspire against the government. These guys squander the money, they steal the money, you know what they do to the money. So it makes us really question the intention. So we went into town, and we were protesting and singing, and we had leaves. And when we were about to get to the city center, we met the kill and go police again, And of course, they said, well, we have orders from above to disperse you guys in 5 minutes. If you don't, well, you blame yourself for what will happen. Part of my leadership of the protest movement on that day was that I've been trained on how to talk to the police. I was very idealistic. I was 19 years old. No, in 1989, I was actually 18 years old. So I stood there, with 2,000 students behind my back, reading all the United Nations Declaration for Human Rights and the reason why I should be allowed to protest peacefully. And the police said disperse. We were arguing, and they opened fire on the crowd. 8 people died. So they rounded up some of us who they called the leaders of the protest, ringleaders, and were taken to a police station on Western Avenue in Lagos, crammed in a small cell. As if that wasn't bad enough, we were tear gassed in that small cell, and people practically passed out because we couldn't breathe. So when it was about 4 p.m. on that day, we were brought out for what I later learned was torture. It was interrogation time, and when we got in front of the sergeant who was to interrogate me and his other colleagues, they had written a letter that I was supposed to sign, and saying that myself and other people at large were planning to overthrow the Nigerian military government. Mind you, this offense is a capital offense, and it takes the death penalty. I was 18 years old. I only went out a few hours ago with leaves in my hand to protest against the World Bank, not even the Nigerian government. And here I am now facing treason. So I said, no, there's no way I can imagine myself overthrowing the government. If I was carrying a gun, I can understand that. But empty leaves, well, nobody will listen, we're roughed up a little bit and beaten up, and they said, well, when you decide, let us know. They put us in an empty room, and then the interrogation of the other people took place. So surprisingly, about an hour later, they came and said, well, we're going to let you guys go now. We said, we didn't really ask why, but they told us, said, well, the American and the British government had intervened on your behalf, The ambassador said, we were too high-handed, so we're going to let you guys go, but next time don't do this again. And there and then, I found out, that these Americans and the British must be the most hypocritical people in the world. The reason was that there's none of the equipment that were used to repress us that day, ranging from tear gas to guns and the handcuffs that brought us to the police station that were made in Nigeria. So you make all these equipments of repression, you ship it to third world countries, as you call them. I imagine where the second world country is, you know. And then when the brutal leaders use it against their own citizens, you write, you know, a statement from your embassy saying it's high-handedness. I mean, it just didn't make sense to me. So between 1989 and 1999, when I came here, I tasted prison 8 different times in different parts of Nigeria. I've been beaten countless number of times, and I must say that the small victory from that exercise was that the universities weren't reduced